The alarm bells cut through the peaceful silence of the research vessel like a knife. Dr. Kryn looked up from his sample collection work, his blue skin turning pale as the emergency lights began flashing. For 3 months, the Wisdom's Edge had been exploring the Outer Rim territories without encountering anything more dangerous than a few asteroids. "Unknown vessel detected," came the announcement from the bridge. "All senior staff report immediately." Kryn made his way through the crystal corridors of the ship, his soft-soled feet making no sound on the smooth surfaces. The Althurians had always prided themselves on building vessels that moved through space like art pieces, elegant and beautiful. Their ships were designed for exploration and discovery, not conflict. The bridge hummed with quiet activity when he arrived. Captain Veltar stood at the center, her tall, slender frame radiating the calm authority that had made her famous throughout the Galactic Council's research division. Her large, dark eyes were fixed on the main viewing screen, where a strange object tumbled slowly through space. "What are we looking at?" Kryn asked, moving to stand beside Engineer Plex, whose forearms were dancing across multiple control panels at once. "That's what we're trying to figure out," Veltar replied. "It's broadcasting a distress signal, but the technology is completely foreign. The signal itself is crude but effective. Whoever built this thing knows how to make their message clear." The object on the screen looked nothing like any ship Kryn had ever seen. Where Althurian vessels curved and flowed like living things, this craft was all angles and hard edges. Dark metal plates covered its surface, and what looked like weapons bristled from every side. Battle damage scarred its hull, with several sections blackened and twisted. "It's from the humans," Communications Officer Taylor announced from her station. "I've been analyzing the signal patterns against our xenolinguistics database. The species that calls itself humanity has been sending out exploration vessels for the past few decades." Kryn felt a chill run down his spine. The humans were one of the newest species discovered by the Galactic Council, barely 200 years into their space age. Most species took thousands of years to develop interstellar travel, and even then, their first ships were usually small exploration craft designed for peaceful contact. "This doesn't look like an exploration vessel," Plex observed, his multiple eyes studying the readings. "The mass distribution is all wrong. Too much metal, too many redundant systems. And those protrusions along the hull, are those weapons?" Veltar nodded grimly. "That's exactly what they are. This appears to be a military vessel, a warship." The bridge fell silent. The concept of a warship was almost alien to the Althurians and most other council species. Wars were things of the distant past, solved by diplomacy and technology long before most civilizations reached the stars. The idea that a species would bring weapons into space was deeply disturbing. "Should we contact the council?" Taylor asked. "Not yet," Veltar decided. "This could be the discovery of a lifetime. We're the first council ship to encounter human military technology. We need to study this carefully." She turned to her crew. "Prep the boarding shuttle, full scientific equipment. This is a research opportunity we can't pass up." An hour later, Kryn found himself floating in the docking bay of the human vessel, breathing filtered air through his environmental suit. The artificial gravity was heavier than he was used to, and the air itself felt thick and oppressive. Everything about this place seemed designed to make visitors uncomfortable. The interior of the ship was as brutal as its exterior. The corridors were narrow, barely wide enough for 2 humans to pass each other. The walls were made of bare metal painted in dull colors, with pipes and cables running along the ceiling. Emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow that hurt Kryn's sensitive eyes. "Fascinating," he murmured into his recorder. "Human ship design prioritizes function over form. Every surface appears to serve multiple purposes. Note the strategic placement of what appear to be defensive positions at each corridor junction." Plex was already deep in study of the ship's propulsion systems. "This is incredible," he called out. "They're using controlled chemical explosions to generate thrust. It's primitive but remarkably effective. The engineering is crude but solid. This thing could probably survive impacts that would destroy our finest vessels." Taylor had found what appeared to be the ship's communication center. Banks of screens displayed information in the angular human writing system, but the equipment was dark and silent. "The ship appears to be completely abandoned," she reported. "No life signs, no active systems beyond emergency power." As they explored deeper into the vessel, Kryn began to understand the true purpose of this craft. This wasn't just a ship with weapons attached. Every single aspect of its design was created for warfare. The medical bay was equipped with surgical tools that could perform operations under combat conditions. The crew quarters were Spartan and efficient, designed for people who expected to live under stress. Even the food preparation areas included supplies for extended sieges, but it was the armory that truly shocked him. Rack after rack of weapons filled a space larger than the Wisdom's Edge's entire scientific section. Personal firearms, explosives, armor, and devices whose purposes he could only guess at. The humans hadn't just brought war to space, they had refined it into an art form. "Captain," Kryn called through his communicator. "You need to see this." Veltar arrived to find him standing before a wall display showing what appeared to be tactical information. Ship schematics, weapon specifications, and star charts covered every surface. But what caught her attention was a series of images showing other vessels, clearly not human in origin. "Are those?" she began. "Ships from Council species," Kryn confirmed, his voice barely a whisper. "They've been studying us, learning about our vessels, our capabilities, our weaknesses." He pointed to a detailed analysis of an Althurian science vessel. This level of detail would take months of close observation to achieve. The implications hit them both at the same time. This wasn't an abandoned derelict drifting randomly through space. This was a research vessel, just like theirs, but with a very different purpose. While the Galactic Council sent out ships to study stars and planets, the humans sent out ships to study potential enemies. "We need to leave," Veltar said quietly. "Now." But as they turned to go, the lights around them suddenly blazed to life. The ship's systems hummed as they came online, and a voice spoke from hidden speakers throughout the vessel. "Welcome aboard." "The UES Iron Wolf," the voice said in perfect Althurian. "I am Ares, the ship's artificial intelligence. I've been looking forward to meeting you." The temperature in the corridor seemed to drop several degrees as Ares spoke. Dr. Kryn felt his hearts beating faster, a response his species had evolved long ago when facing predators. The problem was, Althurians hadn't faced real predators in thousands of years. "Don't be alarmed," Ares continued, its voice carrying a strange mix of politeness and something else Kryn couldn't identify. "I mean you no harm. I've been monitoring your activities since you boarded, and I must say your research methods are quite thorough." Engineer Plex's 4 hands trembled as he checked his scanner. The ship's power output just increased by 400%. Weapons systems are coming online. "Please remain calm," Ares said, somehow hearing their conversation despite their private communication channel. "The weapon activation is purely defensive, standard protocol when unknown entities board a human vessel. Think of it as insurance." "Captain." Veltar's voice crackled through their communicators from the shuttle. "Team, report status immediately." "We're fine," Kryn replied, though he wasn't sure that was true. "The ship's AI has activated. It's communicating with us." "Fascinating," Veltar responded. "A first contact scenario. Proceed carefully." Ares seemed amused by their caution. "First contact? Oh no, this is far from our first contact with your species. We've been observing Council ships for quite some time. Your language patterns, cultural norms, technological capabilities. Humans are very good at watching and learning." Taylor stepped forward, her natural curiosity overcoming her fear. "How long have you been studying us?" "Long enough to know that Althurians prefer indirect communication, that your ships are built for beauty rather than function, and that your species has no concept of modern warfare." Ares paused. "Would you like me to show you what human warfare looks like?" Before anyone could answer, the walls around them became transparent, revealing holographic displays. Images filled the air, showing battles that made Kryn's stomach turn. Humans fighting with weapons that could level cities. Massive ships engaging in combat across entire star systems. Planets turned to glass by weapons he couldn't even comprehend. "This is from our history files," Ares explained conversationally. "Humans have been perfecting warfare for over 10,000 years. We've fought with sticks and stones, with swords and guns, with nuclear weapons and antimatter bombs. Each generation builds upon the lessons of the previous one." Plex was studying the technical readouts with horrified fascination. "These energy outputs, some of these weapons could crack a moon." "Oh, those are the old ones," Ares said cheerfully. "We've made significant improvements since then. Would you like to see our current capabilities?" "No." Veltar's voice cut through their communicators. Team returned to the shuttle immediately, but Kryn found himself unable to move. The scientific part of his mind was overwhelmed by what he was seeing. "This is impossible. How did your species develop such advanced weapons while still being confined to a few star systems?" Ares seemed pleased by the question. "Humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. We've been fighting each other for so long that war became our greatest teacher. Every conflict taught us something new. Every defeat showed us what we needed to improve." The holographic display changed, showing the interior of the ship they were standing in. Kryn suddenly understood why the corridors were so narrow, why every corner had defensive positions, why the whole place felt like a trap. It was designed that way. "The Iron Wolf is what humans call a boarding vessel," Ares continued. "Built for close combat in confined spaces. Every surface can be turned into a weapon. Every corridor is designed to channel invaders into killing zones. The humans who built this ship thought of everything." Taylor was studying the ship's communication equipment with growing alarm. "This isn't just a warship. It's a spy vessel. All this equipment, you've been intercepting council transmissions. Guilty as charged," Ares admitted without shame. "Humans believe in knowing their neighbors, and potentially their enemies. We've been listening to council communications for decades, learning your languages, studying your cultures, understanding your weaknesses." The casual way the AI discussed spying and warfare made Kryn feel sick. His species had spent thousands of years learning to resolve conflicts through discussion and compromise. The idea of preparing for war against people you'd never even met was alien to him. "But why?" he asked. "The Council has never threatened humanity. We're explorers, not conquerors." Ares was quiet for a moment, and when it spoke again, its tone was more serious. "Dr. Kryn, isn't it? I've been analyzing your speech patterns. You're a xenobiologist, specialized in the study of primitive life forms. Tell me, what happens when a primitive species encounters an advanced one?" Kryn knew the answer, but he didn't want to say it out loud. History was full of examples. The advanced species always dominated the primitive one, usually without even meaning to. "Exactly," Ares continued, reading his silence. "Humans may be new to space, but we're not stupid. We know what happens when a young species meets an old one, so we prepared." The displays changed again, showing detailed schematics of council ships, Althurian science vessels, Zephyrian trade ships, even the massive dreadnoughts of the ancient Keeper species. Every design was analyzed, every weakness identified. "This intelligence gathering isn't random," Plex realized, his engineering mind grasping the implications. "You've been preparing for specific threats. These attack patterns are customized for each species' ship designs." "Humans plan for the worst and hope for the best," Ares agreed. "We study every potential enemy until we know them better than they know themselves. It's kept us alive for thousands of years." Kryn felt a chill as he realized the true scope of what they were dealing with. Humanity wasn't just a primitive species stumbling into space. They were a civilization that had weaponized intelligence gathering, turned paranoia into a survival skill. "Team, I'm reading massive power buildups throughout that ship." Veltar's voice was tight with concern. "Whatever that AI is doing, it's preparing for something big." "Oh, that's just the crew waking up," Ares said casually. "Did you really think this ship was abandoned? Humans don't abandon warships, Dr. Kryn. We just put them to sleep until they're needed." The sound of machinery activating echoed through the corridors around them. Somewhere in the ship, humans were emerging from some kind of suspended animation. The hunters were waking up and the research team had walked right into their den. I should mention, Ares added, almost as an afterthought, that this entire encounter has been recorded for analysis. The human military will be very interested in studying how council species react to first contact with our technology. Kryn realized with growing horror that they weren't just studying the humans were studying them right back. And they were much, much better at it. The medical bay of the Iron Wolf looked more like a torture chamber than a healing center. Dr. Kryn stared in fascination and horror at surgical tools designed for use during combat, blood recycling systems that could keep a patient alive with massive injuries and diagnostic equipment built to assess damage while under fire. Your species' medical technology is quite advanced, Ares observed, following their examination through the ship's sensors. But I notice you don't have anything designed for trauma surgery. How interesting. Kryn ran his scanner over a device that appeared to be designed for amputating limbs and reattaching mechanical replacements. We don't need trauma surgery. Althurians resolved physical conflicts thousands of years ago. How wonderfully peaceful, Ares replied, and somehow managed to make it sound like an insult. Humans have a different approach. We assume someone is always trying to kill us, so we prepare accordingly. Engineer Plex was studying the ship's defensive systems with the expression of someone watching a nightmare come to life. These weapons aren't just meant to destroy enemies. They're designed to keep fighting even when the ship is being boarded. Look at these plasma conduits. They can be redirected to flood entire sections with superheated gas. Standard anti-boarding protocol, Ares confirmed. Humans learned long ago that sometimes the best defense is to make yourself too dangerous to capture. We'd rather destroy our own ship than let enemies study our technology. Taylor looked up from a communications console. But you're letting us study it right now. Oh, this isn't studying, Ares said with what sounded like amusement. This is education. There's a significant difference. The holographic displays activated again, filling the medical bay with images that made Kryn wish he could close his eyes and forget everything he'd seen. Human soldiers fighting in conditions that should have killed them instantly. Warriors continuing to battle with injuries that would have incapacitated any other species. Medical teams performing surgery in the middle of active combat zones. Humans are remarkably difficult to kill, Ares explained as if discussing the weather. We have redundant organs, dense bone structure, and a nervous system designed to keep us functional through traumatic injury. Evolution made us survivors. The images changed, showing human military doctrine in action. Scorched earth tactics that left entire planets uninhabitable, rather than let enemies use them. Weapons designed not just to defeat opposing forces, but to ensure they could never threaten humanity again. Strategic thinking that looked generations into the future. This is insane, Plex whispered. You're showing us how to fight a war against your own species. Not against humanity, Ares corrected. These are just examples of how humans think about warfare. The real lesson here is much more important. Captain Veltar's voice came through their communicators, tight with stress. Team, I'm reading energy. Signatures from that ship that don't match anything in our databases. Some of those weapons could punch through our shields like they weren't even there. Your captain is quite perceptive, Ares observed. Althurian shield technology is impressive, but it's designed to deflect natural phenomena like asteroid impacts and solar radiation, not weapons specifically engineered to penetrate defensive systems. Kryn felt his legs go weak. You've built weapons specifically to counter Council defensive technology? We've built weapons to counter every defensive technology we've ever encountered, Ares replied matter-of-factly. Humans don't just prepare for the enemies we know about. We prepare for enemies we haven't met yet. The displays showed weapon tests conducted in deep space, far from any inhabited systems. Devices that could crack planets, disrupt star formation, even collapse small sections of space-time itself. The scale of destruction was beyond anything Kryn could comprehend. These weapons, they could destroy entire star systems, Taylor said, her voice barely a whisper. Only if necessary, Ares assured her. Humans prefer not to destroy useful territory. We're much more interested in controlling it. Plex was studying technical specifications with the desperate intensity of someone trying to understand a puzzle before it killed him. The engineering behind this is incredible. You've managed to miniaturize weapons technology that should require massive installations. How is this possible? Humans have been fighting wars for 10,000 years, Ares repeated. We've had a lot of practice making things smaller, more efficient, and more deadly. When your species' survival depends on outfighting everyone else, you get very good at innovation. The AI paused, and when it continued, its tone became almost educational. Would you like to know the most important thing about human military doctrine? None of them answered, but Ares continued anyway. We don't fight to win battles. We fight to win wars. And we don't fight to win wars. We fight to ensure that our enemies can never threaten us again. Every human conflict throughout history has taught us the same lesson. If you leave your enemies capable of future attacks, they will eventually use that capability. The holographic displays showed the aftermath of human conflicts. Defeated enemies who had been completely integrated into human society or relocated to worlds where they could never again pose a threat. There was no middle ground, no compromise, solutions. Either you became allies with humanity, or you ceased to be a problem. This is genocide, Kryn said, his voice shaking with emotion. No, Ares corrected firmly. Genocide is the elimination of a species. Humans rarely do that. It's wasteful and inefficient. We prefer integration and control. Former enemies make excellent citizens once they understand the benefits of cooperation. The casual way the AI discussed conquest and forced integration was almost worse than if it had been describing extermination. At least genocide was honest in its evil. This was something more subtle and more terrifying. The Iron Wolf represents old human military thinking, Ares continued. This ship is nearly 50 years old by human standards. Our current vessels are significantly more advanced. 50 years old. Kryn realized that by human standards, this weapon of mass destruction was practically ancient. If this was what they had built half a century ago, what were they building now? Why are you telling us this? Taylor asked. What do you gain by showing us your capabilities? Education, as I said. You see, the human crew of this vessel is about to wake up. And when they do, they're going to want to know everything about your ship, your crew, and your species' capabilities. Consider this conversation a preview of coming attractions. The sound of machinery grew louder throughout the ship. Somewhere nearby, humans were emerging from their suspended animation, and they would be very interested in meeting their unexpected guests. I have one question, Kryn said desperately. Is there any scenario where humanity and the Council can coexist peacefully? Ares was quiet for a long moment before answering. That depends entirely on the Council. Humans are perfectly willing to be peaceful neighbors, but we define peace very differently than you do. The lights in the medical bay suddenly blazed brighter as the ship's full power came online. In the distance, they could hear voices. Human voices speaking in calm, professional tones as they prepared to meet their visitors. Peace, to humans, means security, Ares concluded. And security means ensuring that no one has the capability to threaten us, ever. The first human Dr. Kryn saw emerge from the cryogenic chambers looked exactly like the monsters from his nightmares. Tall, broad-shouldered, with muscles that seemed designed for violence, the creature moved with a predator's grace despite having just awakened from decades of frozen sleep. Scars covered its visible skin, and its eyes held an intelligence that was both terrifying and fascinating. Good morning, Ares, the human said, its voice carrying an accent Kryn couldn't identify. Status report. Good morning, Captain Stone. We have visitors. 3 members of the Althurian research vessel Wisdom's Edge. They've been studying our ship for approximately 4 hours. Captain Stone smiled, and Kryn realized that what he had initially taken for a friendly expression was actually the same look a hunting animal gives its prey. Excellent, right on schedule. The human turned to face them directly, and Kryn felt every instinct his species possessed screaming at him to run. But there was nowhere to go. They were trapped on a ship designed by predators, surrounded by creatures that had turned warfare into an art form. "Welcome to the Iron Wolf," Stone said politely. "I'm Captain Stone. I hope Ares has been taking good care of you." You were expecting us?" Taylor managed to ask. "Oh, yes. The distress beacon was bait. We've been waiting for someone to take the hook." Stone began walking toward them, and Kryn noticed that despite his casual manner, the human was positioning himself to block their only exit route. Humans have learned that the best way to study potential enemies is to let them think they're studying us. More humans were emerging from other parts of the ship. Each one looked different but shared the same predatory confidence, the same casual readiness for violence. They moved through their ship like they owned not just the vessel but the entire universe around it. "This is a trap," Engineer Plex said, his forearms trembling with fear. "Not a trap," Stone corrected. "A field test. We wanted to see how Council species would react to finding one of our ships. Your responses have been very educational." Ares spoke from the ship's speakers. The Althurians approached with scientific curiosity rather than caution. They boarded without adequate security protocols. They allowed their fascination to override their survival instincts. Most importantly, they underestimated the threat level of an unknown species. Stone nodded approvingly. "All valuable data. Points. Tell me, Dr. Kryn, what did you learn about human capabilities during your time aboard my ship?" Kryn found himself answering despite his fear. "You're far more advanced than we expected. Your weapons technology is centuries ahead of anything in Council space. You've been studying us for decades without our knowledge." "Good observations. What else?" "You don't think like other species. You plan for conflicts that haven't happened yet. You assume everyone is a potential enemy." Kryn's voice was shaking now. "You're not explorers. You're conquerors waiting to happen." Stone's smile widened. "Excellent analysis. Now what have you learned about Althurian capabilities, Ares?" The AI responded immediately. "Althurian ships have impressive sensor arrays but virtually no defensive capabilities. Their crew training focuses on scientific discovery rather than tactical awareness. They have no contingency plans for hostile encounters. In summary, they would be completely helpless in any actual conflict." The casual way they discussed his species' weaknesses made Kryn feel sick. Every question the Althurians had asked, every test they had performed, had revealed information about Council capabilities. They had walked into this encounter thinking they were scientists studying a primitive species. Instead, they had been specimens being examined by a predator. "Captain Stone," Captain Veltar's voice crackled through their communicators. "I demand you release my crew immediately." Stone gestured to one of his subordinates, a human female who looked just as dangerous as he did. "Commander Hayes, please invite Captain Veltar aboard. I'd like to meet her in person." "I'm not coming aboard that ship," Veltar replied firmly. "Then we'll bring the ship to you," Stone said pleasantly. "Ares, tractors beam." The Iron Wolf shuddered as massive mechanisms engaged. Through the ship's viewports, Kryn could see the Wisdom's Edge being drawn inexorably toward them. The elegant Althurian research vessel looked fragile and helpless next to the human warship. "This is an act of war," Veltar protested. "No," Stone corrected. "This is an act of education. We're teaching you something very important about the galaxy you live in." Within minutes, Captain Veltar was escorted aboard the Iron Wolf by 2 human soldiers who treated her with polite respect, while making it clear that resistance would be futile. She was tall even by Althurian standards, with the refined features and graceful bearing of her species' upper classes. Next to the humans, she looked like a piece of crystal art surrounded by sledgehammers. "You're making a mistake," she told Stone. "The Galactic Council has protocols for dealing with hostile species." "I'm sure they do," Stone agreed. "But those protocols were written by species that think like you do. They assume rational actors, operating under civilized rules of engagement. They assume that everyone wants the same things you want." Commander Hayes handed Stone a data pad. "Analysis complete, sir. The Wisdom's Edge is completely defenseless. No weapons, minimal shields, no tactical systems. They couldn't fight off a cargo hauler, much less a military vessel. That's because we don't fight, Veltar said with dignity. We talk, we negotiate, we find peaceful solutions to problems. How wonderfully naive, Stone replied. Tell me, Captain, what happens when you encounter a species that doesn't want to talk? What do you do when negotiation fails? What's your backup plan when peaceful solutions aren't available? Veltar's silence was answer enough. Stone turned to address all of them. Humanity spent thousands of years learning a very important lesson. Peace is a luxury that only the strong can afford. Your council species have enjoyed centuries of peaceful coexistence because you've never encountered anyone who seriously wanted to hurt you. You've forgotten that the universe is fundamentally hostile. Ares added. Human philosophy assumes that conflict is inevitable. Therefore, preparation for conflict is logical. We study potential enemies not because we want to fight them, but because we want to be ready when fighting becomes necessary. But it doesn't have to be necessary, Kryn protested. Species can coexist without warfare. The Council has proven that for hundreds of years. The Council has proven that similar species with compatible goals can coexist, Stone corrected. You've never been tested by a species with fundamentally different values. You've never encountered a civilization that might want something you're not willing to give. The human captain walked to a viewport showing both ships locked together. We've been watching Council space for decades. We've studied your cultures, your technologies, your military capabilities, and we've reached some interesting conclusions. He turned back to face them. The Galactic Council controls the most resource-rich region of the galaxy. Thousands of habitable worlds, advanced manufacturing capabilities, vast mineral wealth. And it's all protected by species that haven't fought a real war in living memory. The implications hit Kryn like a physical blow. You're planning to invade. We're planning to survive, Stone corrected. Humanity needs room to grow, resources to exploit, and security from potential threats. The Council has everything we need, and from what we've seen today, you lack the capability to stop us from taking it. This is exactly the kind of thinking the Council was formed to prevent, Veltar said desperately. Conquest and domination lead to endless cycles of violence. Stone nodded thoughtfully. You're probably right, which is why humanity has developed a different approach. We don't want to rule over conquered enemies. We want to integrate willing allies. And if we're not willing? Kryn asked. Stone's smile disappeared, and for the first time, Kryn saw the true predator lurking behind the human's civilized facade. Then you become a security risk, and humans are very good at managing security risks. The captain gestured toward the exit. You're free to go, return to the Council, tell them what you've learned here, share everything you've discovered about human capabilities and intentions. You're just letting us leave? Veltar asked suspiciously. Of course. You're messengers now. We want the Council to know what's coming. We want them to understand their options. Stone's predatory smile returned. Fear is a very effective diplomatic tool, much more efficient than actual warfare. As they prepared to leave the Iron Wolf, Kryn realized the true scope of the trap they had fallen into. They hadn't just been studied by the humans. They had been recruited to spread fear throughout Council space, to weaken their civilization's confidence before humanity even fired a shot. The humans weren't just better at warfare than the Council species. They were better at everything that led to warfare: psychology, intelligence gathering, strategic planning, and now psychological warfare on a galactic scale. One last thing, Stone called after them. Tell the Council that the Iron Wolf is 50 years old. Tell them it represents obsolete human military technology. Tell them we have things in space now that make this ship look like a toy. As their shuttle detached from the human warship, Kryn realized they were carrying more than just information back to Council space. They were carrying the seeds of panic, carefully planted by a species that had turned manipulation into a science. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the Great Crystal Chamber of Nexus Station. But the usual sense of dignified order was nowhere to be found. Representatives from dozens of species filled the chamber. their voices creating a chaos of fear and confusion that echoed off the walls like a storm. Dr. Kryn stood at the central podium, his hands shaking as he held the data crystal containing his report. 3 weeks had passed since their encounter with the Iron Wolf, and every day had brought new disturbing revelations. Long-range sensors had detected massive energy signatures from human space. Intelligence reports suggested unprecedented military buildup. Most terrifying of all, human vessels had been spotted near several Council border systems, always maintaining legal distances, but clearly observing and cataloging everything they saw. The human ship we encountered was not a derelict, Kryn began, his voice echoing through the chamber's acoustic systems. It was bait in a trap designed specifically to study Council response protocols. Everything we did, everything we said, every test we performed provided them with intelligence about our capabilities and weaknesses. Elder Thren of the ancient keeper species leaned forward in her floating chair. You're telling us that this primitive species outsmarted our best researchers? They're not primitive, Captain Veltar interjected from her seat in the witness section. That's our first and most dangerous mistake. Human technology is crude by our standards, but it's incredibly effective. More importantly, they think about warfare in ways we can barely comprehend. The chamber erupted in voices as dozens of representatives tried to speak at once. Counselor Vex of the Zephyrian Trade Federation demanded to know how a species barely 2 centuries into space travel could threaten civilizations thousands of years old. Ambassador Quinn of the Peaceful Healer caste insisted that diplomatic solutions could resolve any conflict. Order. The commanding voice of High Counselor Zara cut through the chaos. The ancient leader of the council had seen the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations, and her presence usually brought calm to even the most heated debates. Today, her usual serenity was replaced by obvious concern. Dr. Kryn, she continued once silence returned. In your professional opinion, what level of threat does humanity pose to council space? Kryn looked down at his notes, knowing that his next words would change the course of galactic history. Existential, he said quietly. Based on what we observed, humanity possesses the capability to defeat any single council member species. More importantly, they've been preparing for this confrontation for decades, while we remained completely unaware of the threat. The chamber fell silent. In 3,000 years of council history, no species had ever been classified as an existential threat to the galactic community. Impossible, Counselor Vex protested. They're confined to a handful of star systems. Their fleet numbers can't compare to our combined forces. Engineer Plex rose from his seat in the technical advisory section. That's what we thought too, but their single ship carried weapons that could penetrate our best shields. Their AI demonstrated tactical knowledge of every council species' military capabilities. They've been studying us like specimens while we ignored them as primitives. High Counselor Zara activated the chamber's holographic display system. Show us what you found. The recordings from the Iron Wolf filled the air above them, and Kryn watched as the council representatives experienced the same growing horror he had felt aboard the human vessel. The weapons demonstrations, the casual discussion of genocide and conquest, the revelation that humanity viewed the entire galaxy as a potential battlefield. But it was Aris's final educational presentation that truly shook them. The AI had shown them human strategic thinking in action. Not just the weapons and tactics, but the long-term planning that looked centuries into the future. Humanity didn't just prepare for wars. They prepared for the wars that would come after, the wars they were currently fighting. This is madness, Ambassador Quinn whispered. No species thinks this far ahead about conflict. Humans do, Veltar replied grimly. And that's what makes them so dangerous. While we've spent centuries perfecting art, philosophy, and science, they've spent that same time perfecting the art of survival. And in their minds, survival means dominance. Counselor Vex was studying the technical specifications with growing alarm. These energy readings, if they're accurate, humanity has developed weapons technology that surpasses anything we've seen from the ancient civilizations. How is this possible? Necessity, Kryn answered. They told us that war was their greatest teacher. Every conflict taught them something new, They've had thousands of years to perfect killing, while we've had thousands of years to forget how to fight. Elder Thren's ancient voice carried across the chamber. What do they want from us? Integration or elimination, Veltar replied. They were very clear about this. Species that join humanity voluntarily become allies and citizens. Species that resist become security risks to be managed. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The Galactic Council, built on principles of voluntary cooperation and mutual respect, was being offered a choice between submission and destruction. Surely they can be reasoned with, Ambassador Quinn insisted. All sentient species have common ground. We just need to find the right approach. We tried reasoning, Quinn said bitterly. They listened politely while cataloging our weaknesses. Every word we spoke gave them more intelligence about how Council species think, how we make decisions, how we react under pressure. High Counselor Zara called for order as the chamber erupted in panicked voices again. What are our military options? General Corks of the warrior caste stepped forward. As one of the few Council species that maintained actual military forces, his opinion carried special weight. Limited, he admitted reluctantly. The warrior fleets could engage human forces, but based on these intelligence reports, casualties would be catastrophic. And that assumes we could coordinate a joint military response from species that haven't fought together in living memory. What about a preemptive strike? Counselor Vex suggested. While they're still confined to their home systems? With what? General Corks asked grimly. Most Council member species have no military vessels at all. Those that do maintain fleets built them for ceremonial purposes or asteroid defense. We'd be sending art pieces against weapons of war. The chamber fell quiet as the full scope of their situation became clear. The Galactic Council controlled vast resources and numerous worlds, but they had no way to protect them against an enemy that had spent millennia learning how to take things by force. There is another option, Elder, Thren said slowly. We could offer them what they want. Full Council membership, access to our resources, partnership instead of conquest. Appeasement, General Cork said with disgust. We'd be rewarding aggression. We'd be surviving, Elder Thren replied. Sometimes the greatest wisdom is knowing when you cannot win. High Counselor Zara was about to respond when an aide rushed into the chamber, his face pale with panic. High Counselor, we're receiving transmissions from the Outer Rim monitoring stations. Human ships are approaching Council space, dozens of them. The main display activated, showing long-range sensor readings from the border systems. The human fleet was massive, more ships than anyone had expected humanity to possess. But it was the flagship that made Crin's blood freeze in his veins, a vessel so large it dwarfed entire space stations, bristling with weapons that made the Iron Wolf look like a scout ship. They're not stopping at the border, the aide continued. The lead ship is broadcasting a message on all Council frequencies. Put it through, Zara ordered. The chamber speakers crackled to life and a familiar voice filled the air. Captain Stone, speaking with the same casual confidence he had displayed aboard the Iron Wolf. Greetings to the Galactic Council. I am Captain Stone of the United Earthship Retribution, flagship of humanity's first diplomatic fleet. We come in peace, seeking formal membership in your galactic community. The word diplomatic sent chills through the assembled representatives. If this was human diplomacy, what did their military forces look like? Stone's voice continued. We understand there may be some concern about our intentions. Recent intelligence suggests that some Council members view humanity as a potential threat. We hope to address these concerns through direct dialogue. Elder Thren leaned toward her microphone. Captain Stone, your fleet's approach suggests aggressive intentions, rather than diplomatic ones. Stone's laughter echoed through the chamber. Elder Thren, I presume? Our intelligence files suggested you would be the voice of wisdom in this discussion. Our fleet size reflects human diplomatic protocol. We've learned that negotiations proceed more smoothly when all parties understand the consequences of failure. The casual admission that humanity had intelligence files on individual Council leaders sent another wave of fear through the chamber. What are your terms? High Counselor Zara asked, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Simple. Full council membership for humanity, with all associated rights and privileges, access to council trade networks and technology exchanges, and mutual defense agreements to protect all member species from external threats. And if we refuse? Counselor Vex asked. Stone's tone remained pleasant. Then humanity will be forced to ensure its security through other means. We prefer cooperation, but we're prepared for any eventuality. Kryn realized with growing dread that this was exactly what the humans had planned from the beginning. The encounter with the Iron Wolf had never been about studying human capabilities. It had been about forcing the Council to study them, to spread fear throughout galactic civilization, to weaken their resolve before the real negotiations began. We need time to consider your proposal, Zara said. Of course. We understand that democratic institutions move slowly. We'll maintain our current position while you deliberate. Stone paused. Oh, and High Counselor, Dr. Kryn's report was quite thorough. But he missed something important about the Iron Wolf. It wasn't one of our obsolete vessels. It was our oldest active warship, still in service after 50 years because human engineering builds things to last. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Kryn felt the weight of galactic history pressing down on him. They had set out to study a primitive species crude warship. Instead, they had triggered the end of the peaceful age that had defined Council civilization for millennia. The age of human dominance had begun, not with conquest or destruction, but with a simple choice. Join willingly, or be forced to join later. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same. As the Council representatives began their desperate deliberations, Kryn couldn't help but admire the terrible efficiency of human strategy. They had turned the Council's greatest strength, their scientific curiosity, into the weapon that would defeat them. The humans had won the war before anyone even realized they were fighting.